The Great Pyramid was built with 2 million stones, each one heavier than an elephant. How did ancient builders move mountains without modern tools? By the end, you will understand the forgotten methods that let them achieve the impossible. We will uncover how they transported 800-ton stones and made giant statues walk across islands. What do you believe is the true limit of human ingenuity? An 800-ton stone block is heavier than 2 fully loaded jumbo jets. The ancient builders at Baalbek in Lebanon worked with stones of this staggering size, moving them from quarries to temple sites across miles of uneven ground. On a remote Pacific island, the Rapa Nui people somehow transported their iconic Moai statues, some weighing over 80 tons, from inland quarries to coastal platforms, a journey that could span up to 11 miles. These are not isolated feats. In Egypt, granite obelisks reaching 70 feet in length were raised skyward, while in England, the builders of Stonehenge maneuvered sarsen stones, weighing up to 50 tons across the rolling landscape. Archaeologist Mark Lehner has described the logistics of such projects as a near insurmountable nightmare, a puzzle of physics and human coordination on a grand scale. To even begin, these builders had to become masters of fundamental physical principles. They learned to outsmart friction, using rollers or slippery clay slurry to make stones glide. They understood leverage, using long wooden beams to pivot and lift immense weights inch by inch. Most importantly, they grasped weight distribution, ensuring that the force was spread out to prevent their crude tools from being crushed and their workers from being overwhelmed. Think for a moment, how would you move a stone heavier than 10 elephants using only wood, rope, and mud? Cultures across the globe, separated by oceans and centuries, all arrived at their own brilliant solutions to this universal challenge. The journey to uncover their secrets begins with the most elegant and widely used method of all. A single wooden pole and a sturdy rock could shift the world. This was the power grasped by ancient engineers through the mighty lever. While Archimedes famously boasted he could move the earth with a long enough lever, builders for millennia before him were already performing their own miracles with this simple machine. The principle is beautifully straightforward. By placing a pivot point, the fulcrum, close to a heavy object, a long beam resting on that pivot grants incredible mechanical advantage. A small push on the long end translates into a mighty lifting force on the short end. Think of the pry bar in your toolbox or the seesaw in a playground. You are using the same fundamental physics that raised pyramids. Ancient builders employed different classes of levers for specific tasks. To lift a corner of a multi-ton stone just enough to slip a roller underneath, they might use a first-class lever, with the fulcrum positioned between the worker's effort and the immense load. For prying a stubborn block loose from the quarry face, a second-class lever where the load sits between the fulcrum and the effort provided immense force. These tools were not delicate. They were crafted from the hardest available woods like oak or cedar, shaped into long, robust beams that could withstand unimaginable stress. The fulcrum itself was critical, often a solid, unyielding stone chosen with care to prevent slipping or shattering under pressure. We can see this logic etched into the very stones of the Great Pyramid. As each tier was completed, workers faced the daunting task of raising blocks onto the next level. Egyptologists suggest they likely employed a clever system of levers. A team would first lift one end of a block, propping it up. Then they would lift the other end, each small lift gaining a little more height, perhaps stacking wooden cribbing underneath each time. Through this patient, incremental walking of the stone upward, they conquered gravity itself. It was a symphony of coordinated effort, with teams of workers heaving in rhythm on command, their collective strength amplified 100-fold by the lever's elegant design. This simple machine solved one of construction's greatest challenges, but lifting a stone is only half the battle. The real puzzle was how to make it travel. A wooden sled transformed an impossible drag into a manageable pull. Across the ancient world, from the deserts of Egypt to the river valleys of Mesopotamia, this simple platform became the primary vehicle for moving mountains. The concept was brilliantly straightforward. Placing a colossal stone onto a sturdy timber sledge eliminated the grinding friction of dragging it raw across the earth. Instead of the entire bottom surface fighting the ground, only the smooth runners of the sled made contact, concentrating the weight and making movement possible. Experimental archaeology has shown just how effective this was. Researchers built a full-scale replica of an Egyptian sledge and attempted to pull a heavy block. They discovered that dry sand created a massive barrier, a literal wall of resistance. But when they poured water onto the path ahead of the sledge, something remarkable happened. The moisture created a film of wetness between the wooden runners and the sand, drastically reducing friction. The force required to pull the load was cut in half. A team that once struggled with a monumental task could now move the same weight with far less effort, a testament to ancient ingenuity. The sledges themselves were feats of engineering. They were not flimsy contraptions but robust frames crafted from the strongest available timbers, like acacia or cedar, designed to distribute the immense weight of the stone evenly. The ropes were thick cables woven from papyrus or hemp, capable of withstanding tons of tension. The organization of labor was a spectacle of human coordination. A single transport could involve hundreds of workers, divided into teams along multiple long ropes. Foremen or overseers would stand on the stone itself, chanting rhythms and beating drums to synchronize the heaves. Every pull had to be perfectly unified. A single misstep, one person pulling out of sync, could cause the ropes to go slack and the entire effort to fail. We have a vivid snapshot of this process from ancient Egypt. A temple relief from Queen Hatshepsut's mortuary temple depicts the transport of her towering granite obelisks. It shows a colossal stone bound to a massive sledge, being hauled by a veritable army of laborers in parallel rows. A figure stands at the front of the sledge, pouring water onto the pathway, while overseers direct the operation. Can you hear the rhythmic chant, feel the strain in every muscle, see the sled inching forward through the mud? The sheer physical endurance required for such a task is almost beyond comprehension. The sledge was the undisputed workhorse of ancient construction, a testament to the power of coordinated human effort. Yet, its efficiency always hinged on the surface it traveled across, a limitation that would inspire an even smoother solution. A heavy stone could glide forward as if on a moving road made of wood. This was the magic of rollers, a technology that turned dragging into rolling and conquered friction in an entirely new way. The principle was a stroke of genius. Instead of sliding a sledge across a fixed surface, builders placed a series of round logs or rollers perpendicular to the direction of travel. As the load moved forward, it rolled over these logs. The key was the constant repositioning. As the sledge passed over a roller, workers behind it would pick up that now freed log and rush it to the front, creating a continuous, self-renewing track. It was a primitive but brilliantly effective conveyor belt, one that could carry stones for miles. The idea likely came from observing nature, perhaps watching a log tumble down a hillside or a round seed pod skitter across the ground. Ancient engineers transformed this simple observation into a world-moving technology. Not just any log would do, however. the wood had to be strong enough to bear the crushing weight without splintering. Dense hardwoods like oak, elm, or beech were ideal. The diameter of the rollers was also crucial. Too thin, and they would crack under pressure. Too thick, and they would be difficult to move and reposition. Builders found a sweet spot, creating rollers thick enough to be robust yet manageable for a team to handle. The pathway itself had to be prepared, leveled and cleared of obstructions to prevent the heavy load from veering off course or getting stuck. Can you picture the orchestration required? Dozens of workers, each with a specific role. Some pulling on the main ropes, others dedicated solely to the endless cycle of retrieving and placing rollers, all moving in a precise, practiced rhythm to keep the stone in motion. This concept evolved into more permanent solutions. In Egypt, paved limestone causeways led directly from the Nile to pyramid construction sites, providing a smooth, durable surface for sledges and rollers alike. At Stonehenge, some archaeologists theorize the builders may have used a system of wooden rails, like early railway tracks, to guide the massive sarsen stones across the landscape. Perhaps the most dramatic application of this rolling principle is found far away on Easter Island. One compelling theory suggests the island's iconic Moai statues were not merely dragged horizontally, but were actually made to walk. Using ropes tied at the statue's head and base, teams could rock the massive figure from side to side, each small tilt moving it forward just a little. In essence, the statue's own base became a kind of roller, pivoting and rocking its way across the island in a slow, staggering gait. The sheer logistics of managing hundreds of heavy wooden rollers for a single transport is a staggering thought. How did they keep them all aligned? What happened when one split under the immense weight? This rolling motion was a revolutionary step, yet its true potential was unlocked when combined with something even more fundamental. A slick path of wet clay could make an 80-ton statue slide like a boat through water. This slippery secret was one of the most powerful tools in the ancient builder's arsenal, turning the earth itself into a low-friction highway. From the sun-baked tombs of Egypt to the meticulous records of Chinese engineers, we find the same technique depicted again and again, the deliberate wetting of a pathway to conquer friction. The physics behind it is both simple and profound. By pouring water onto sand or clay, you create a thin layer of mud, a lubricant that separates the rough wooden runners of a sledge from the equally rough ground. This liquid layer bears the load, allowing the two solid surfaces to glide past each other with minimal contact. The result is a dramatic drop in the coefficient of friction, a scientific measure of how much force it takes to slide one surface over another. Astonishingly, a well-prepared mud track could achieve a friction coefficient lower than modern non-stick surfaces like Teflon, making the impossible drag of a pyramid block feel almost manageable. A practical application was a carefully choreographed operation. First, the roadbed had to be meticulously prepared, leveled and compacted to create a smooth, hard surface that would hold the lubricant. Then came the slurry, a specific mixture of water and clay or sand, mixed to just the right consistency, not too thin to be squeezed out instantly, not too thick to become sticky. As the sledge was pulled, workers walked alongside, constantly replenishing the water to maintain that critical slick film. Can you visualize the scene, the glistening path, the steam rising in the heat, the rhythmic splash of water pots? In some cases, builders may have gone a step further, constructing shallow irrigation channels to flood entire causeways. In colder climates, there is speculation that animal fats were added to the mix to prevent the water from freezing, creating a greasy, effective lubricant that worked even in frosty conditions. One compelling theory for the transport of Stonehenge's massive sarsen stones involves a similar principle. Imagine a wooden sleigh carrying a 40-ton stone, not dragged directly on the ground, but sliding along a track of greased logs. The combination of a smooth runner on a lubricated surface would have reduced the pulling force to something a large team of people could actually achieve. It makes you wonder, could we use this ancient knowledge today for moving ultra-heavy equipment where modern machinery cannot reach? The sheer cleverness is staggering. They looked at a puddle of mud and saw a solution for moving mountains, a testament to a deep, intuitive grasp of physics that required no formal equations, only brilliant observation. But orchestrating this slippery ballet required more than just water and wood. It demanded the most complex resource of all, human coordination on an epic scale. The true engine behind these ancient marvels was not wood or rope, but the disciplined, synchronized power of thousands of human beings. Think of a single granite block with 24 heavy ropes radiating from it, each one gripped by a team of laborers. A single voice, a chant or a drumbeat would rise above the chaos, and in that moment a scattered crowd became a single, living machine. Every muscle strained in perfect unison, transforming countless individual efforts into one unstoppable directed force. This level of coordination required a social structure as sophisticated as the engineering itself. Societies from Egypt to the Andes developed systems to mobilize their populations for these grand projects. The pharaohs used the corvée system, a form of national service where farmers would work on state projects during the Nile's flood season when their fields were underwater. Far away in South America, the Inca Empire implemented the mita, a rotational labor tax that drew workers from across their vast territory to build roads, terraces, and temples. This was not a chaotic mob of slaves, but a highly organized workforce with a clear chain of command. At the top were the master architects and engineers who designed the project. Below them were overseers who managed the site logistics, and on the ground there were gang foremen, each responsible for a specific team, ensuring their men pulled in rhythm and maintained the grueling pace. Keeping this human machine running required more than just orders. Rhythmic chanting and music were not mere entertainment. They were essential tools for synchronization. The steady beat allowed everyone to heave at the exact same instant, maximizing the force of each pull and preventing the dangerous slackening of ropes. The physical well-being of this workforce was a practical necessity. For projects lasting decades like a pyramid, workers needed consistent nutrition, medical care, and rest. Archaeological evidence from the Giza plateau reveals bakeries, breweries, and fish processing facilities capable of feeding thousands, along with settlements that housed the workers and their families. The configuration of the labor itself was a science. For pulling a massive sledge, workers were arranged in parallel rows to distribute the force evenly along the ropes. For more complex maneuvers like pivoting a stone into a tight space, teams would be positioned at specific angles, some pulling, some bracing, all responding to the foreman's calls. The Roman army, masters of both military and civil engineering, applied these same principles to erect their massive siege towers. Moving such a prefabricated structure required every soldier to know his place and his task, lifting, pushing, and stabilizing in a carefully orchestrated sequence. This immense human effort raises profound questions. What did it feel like to spend your life moving stones for a pharaoh's tomb you would never enter? What kind of belief system or societal pressure could compel such sustained, back-breaking labor? The sheer scale of this organization is a monument in itself, a testament to what humanity can achieve when we move together. And this raw human power found its ultimate expression when channeled through the cleverest simple machine of all. The raw power of a team of oxen could pull what 100 men could not. Across the ancient world, the immense, patient strength of domesticated animals became a vital engine for construction, supplementing and even surpassing the limits of human endurance. For moving truly colossal loads over long distances, beasts of burden were indispensable. The history of this partnership stretches back millennia, with cattle like oxen, which are castrated male bulls, being the primary source of animal power. Their docile nature, combined with tremendous pulling strength, made them ideal for the slow, steady work of hauling stone-laden sledges. Donkeys and mules also played crucial roles, especially in rougher terrain where their agility and endurance were valued. But the true giants of this labor force were elephants, employed for centuries in the forests and temple complexes of Southeast Asia. These intelligent animals could be directed to nudge, lift, and pull massive teak logs and stone blocks with a precision and power that no machine of the era could match. The temples of Angkor Wat stand as a testament to their capabilities, yet harnessing this raw power was its own engineering challenge. The earliest yokes and harnesses were often crude and inefficient. A poorly designed throat and girth harness could actually choke a horse or ox, restricting its breathing and drastically reducing the amount of force it could exert. It was like trying to run a marathon while someone was squeezing your chest. Over centuries, designs improved, with padded collars that distributed the weight across the animal's shoulders and chest, allowing them to put their full body weight into the pull without injury. The logistics of maintaining these animal teams were staggering. A large construction site required vast stores of fodder, fresh water, and dedicated handlers. The health of every ox was a direct asset to the project, and their care was a serious, practical concern. Can you picture the scene, the dusty air filled with the lowing of oxen, the shouts of their drivers, the sheer scale of a workforce that included both man and beast? This reliance on animal labor forces us to reflect on the ancient world's ethical boundaries. What was the line between utilizing a vital resource and inflicting suffering? These animals were not mere machines, they were living beings, and their well-being was intrinsically linked to the success of the monument. Yet, for all their strength, a team of oxen could only pull in a straight line. To steer a multi-ton block into a precise position, to make it climb, or to pivot it through a tight space required a more subtle form of control. The wheel, a symbol of human progress, was not the immediate miracle we might assume for moving mountains. This revolutionary device first appeared in Mesopotamia around 3500 BCE, a solid disc of wood painstakingly carved from 3 planks and held together with braces. Its principle was a leap in physics, concentrating a heavy load onto a fixed axle while allowing the wheel itself to rotate, transforming sliding friction into the far more manageable rolling friction. This allowed a cart to carry tons of stone with dramatically less effort than dragging a sledge. Yet for all its elegance, the wheel had severe limitations when faced with the true giants of ancient construction. Those early solid wheels were incredibly strong, but they were not indestructible. Under the staggering weight of an 800-ton block, the wood could splinter, the axle could snap, and the entire system would fail catastrophically. Furthermore, wheels demanded a specific kind of landscape. They required hard, level, well-maintained roads to function. A cart carrying a 50-ton stone would simply sink into soft sand or mud, its wheels becoming hopelessly stuck. This is why we see such a clear division in the archaeological record. For standard-sized building blocks, the Romans were masters of wheeled transport, using ox-drawn carts to move precisely cut stones along their famed network of straight, paved roads. Yet for their most monumental projects, like the erection of a 100-foot-tall Egyptian obelisk in the heart of Rome, they reverted to the older, more reliable methods of sledges and rollers. The obelisk itself was simply too heavy, too precious to trust to a technology that could shatter under its immense weight. So why did cultures with access to the wheel still choose to drag their largest stones? The answer lies in context. On a prepared causeway, a sledge spreading its load across a wide surface was far more stable and less prone to catastrophic failure than a wheeled cart concentrating that same force onto 4 small points. The wheel was a brilliant tool for the right job, but it was not a universal key. Its story is a powerful reminder that the most advanced technology is not always the most practical. This pragmatic ingenuity reaches its absolute peak in the most iconic and enduring symbol of ancient engineering itself. A colossal earthen highway climbing steadily toward the heavens was the final answer to gravity's greatest challenge. The inclined plane, in its most magnificent form as the construction ramp, was the ancient world's elevator, the only way to lift multi-ton stones hundreds of feet into the air. This simple slope was a masterpiece of physics, trading brute force for patient distance. By moving a block up a gentle incline, workers could overcome its immense weight with a fraction of the force needed to lift it straight up, turning an impossible vertical hoist into a manageable, gradual climb. The principle is one you use every time you choose a sloping driveway over a steep flight of stairs while pushing a heavy cart. Ancient engineers scaled this everyday insight to a breathtaking degree. Structural engineers today can calculate that a ramp with a gentle 5% grade would reduce the pulling force on a 2.5-ton block to a little over 100 kilograms, a load a small team could handle. The real genius, however, lay in the design and execution of these ramps. Builders developed several distinct types, each with its own logic and challenges. The most straightforward was the massive linear ramp, a single, direct route built against one face of the pyramid. While simple to construct, it required an almost unimaginable volume of material, growing exponentially as the pyramid rose higher. For the Great Pyramid, a single straight ramp to the top would have required more material than the pyramid itself. This led to more efficient designs. The zigzag ramp ran diagonally back and forth across a single face of the structure, its switchbacks allowing for a longer, gentler slope without consuming the entire landscape. Then there is the most debated and intriguing theory of all, the internal spiral ramp. This concept suggests that as the pyramid grew, a corkscrew roadway was built right into its superstructure, winding around the core and hidden from view. This would have been incredibly efficient on materials, but it presents a formidable puzzle. How did workers navigate tight corners with massive blocks? Where was the ramp's structure anchored? The debate over which system was used at Giza remains one of archaeology's great unsolved mysteries. The construction of the ramp itself was a monumental undertaking. They were not simple piles of dirt, but engineered structures built from mud bricks, compacted rubble, and desert clay, often reinforced with wooden timbers for stability. Each layer had to be tamped down hard to prevent the ramp from settling or collapsing under the constant, heavy traffic. Can you picture the scene on that narrow, rising causeway? Workers and oxen straining in unison, the sledges inching forward, with overseers ensuring the precarious loads did not slip over the edge. The air would have been thick with dust and the sound of creaking wood and shouted commands. Every bucket of water poured to lubricate the path had to be carried up that same slope. The logistical ballet of supplying this vertical worksite, of feeding thousands of laborers and keeping the endless stream of blocks moving upward, is a staggering feat of organization that rivals the engineering. The ramp was indeed a highway to the sky, a temporary mountain built to create a permanent one, and its very existence demonstrates a profound understanding of both materials and human perseverance. The journey of a monument did not begin with a grand design, but within the dusty chaos of a quarry. Here, ancient workers performed their first act of genius, transforming a mountain into manageable geometry. They understood a fundamental truth: moving a perfectly smooth, rectangular block was infinitely easier than dragging a ragged, uneven boulder. This initial shaping was a masterclass in foresight, dramatically reducing both the final weight and the friction of the journey to come. To achieve this, they became intimate students of the stone itself. Geologists studying ancient quarries have found evidence that workers did not simply fight the rock, they collaborated with it. They learned to read the natural grain and seek out pre-existing fracture lines known as bedding planes, using the stone's own weaknesses to their advantage. Their toolkit was deceptively simple, yet brutally effective. Dolerite pounders, hard stone balls held in the hand, were used to pulverize granite into dust through relentless, patient pounding. Copper chisels, softer than the stone but capable of being sharpened again and again, scored precise lines, but their most clever tool was a simple piece of wood. In a technique called channeling, workers would cut a series of deep grooves along the desired fracture line. Then they would hammer dry wooden wedges into these channels. Next came the magic. Water was poured over the wedges. The wood would swell with tremendous force, creating immense pressure along the precise line of weakness until, with a sharp crack, the stone surrendered and split perfectly in two. We can see this entire process frozen in time at the unfinished obelisk in Aswan, Egypt. This colossal shaft, still attached to the bedrock, is a time capsule. The channels cut by workers are clearly visible, as are the marks from their dolerite hammers, offering a perfect snapshot of quarrying technology interrupted. Once a block was freed, the work of refinement continued. Artisans would dress the stone, hammering and grinding its surfaces to a surprising smoothness. This was not merely for aesthetics. A smooth surface met far less resistance when dragged on a sledge than a rough one. They often left small, strategic protrusions of stone called bosses on the sides. These were not mistakes. They were handles for the future, sturdy anchor points for tying the complex web of ropes that would soon carry the block away. Can you picture the immense planning involved? Every minute spent perfecting the stone in the quarry saved hours of agonizing labor on the transport route and at the construction site itself. It was a brilliant division of labor, turning the raw chaos of the mountain into orderly, portable pieces. This meticulous preparation on solid ground was only the prelude, for the heaviest cargo often had to embark on a far more perilous leg of its journey upon the water. A massive stone block could float as effortlessly as a leaf, its impossible weight magically suspended by the water beneath it. For ancient engineers, rivers and seas were not barriers but the ultimate superhighways, offering a path of least resistance for their heaviest cargo. The Nile in Egypt, the Tigris and Euphrates in Mesopotamia, and the Yangtze in China became vital supply lines, their currents doing the work of thousands of laborers. The secret was buoyancy, the upward force of water that effectively cancels out gravity's pull on an object. By lashing a multi-ton obelisk to a fleet of papyrus reed boats or a single, massive wooden barge, builders transformed an unmovable mountain into a buoyant, manageable load. The only challenges that remained were moving it and, most critically, keeping it afloat. Maritime archaeologists studying ancient ship designs have found that these vessels were feats of engineering in their own right. They were not delicate river craft but incredibly robust, wide-bodied barges built from thick timbers, designed to distribute the concentrated weight of the stone and prevent the hull from buckling or swamping. The process of loading was a delicate operation in itself. Builders often constructed special canals or basins right up to the quarry face. A block would be dragged onto a jetty, and the barge, intentionally sunk by filling it with ballast, would be maneuvered underneath. Then the ballast was removed and the barge would slowly rise, lifting the stone clear of the dock and ready for its journey. Think of the precision required, the careful calculation of buoyancy to ensure the vessel rose evenly and did not tip. Once underway, these floating giants relied on nature's power. They caught the wind with large square sails or were pulled by teams of rowboats in calm waters. On rivers, they often simply rode the current downstream, with skilled pilots using massive steering oars to guide their precious charge. The risks were immense. A sudden storm on the Mediterranean could send a shipment of granite columns to the bottom of the sea in an instant, a catastrophic loss of years of labor. One of history's most epic maritime transports was the journey of the granite columns for the Pantheon in Rome. Quarried in Egypt, these monolithic pillars were loaded onto seagoing barges and sailed across the treacherous open waters of the Mediterranean, a voyage of over 1,000 miles before being transferred to river barges for the final trip up the Tiber. Can you imagine the tension watching that heavily laden ship disappear over the horizon, knowing that a single mistake could doom the entire enterprise? But successfully navigating these watery highways was only one part of the puzzle. The stone's journey was not over when it reached the riverbank. It then had to be guided with pinpoint accuracy across land to its final, sacred destination. A perfectly straight line carved across miles of wilderness did not happen by chance. Before a single stone could be moved, ancient engineers had to conquer the landscape with their minds, using a sophisticated intellectual toolkit of geometry, astronomy, and precise measurement. This was the invisible blueprint, the master plan that guided every physical effort. The true foundation of these wonders was not stone, but knowledge. Builders from Egypt to Britain possessed an advanced grasp of mathematics that allowed them to calculate volumes, plot gradients for ramps, and maintain perfect symmetry in structures that would take generations to complete. They understood complex geometric principles like the 3-4-5 triangle to create perfect right angles, a technique still used in construction today. Their most vital tool for large-scale planning was a simple knotted rope. By tying knots at precise, standardized intervals, they created a flexible, highly accurate measuring tape that could lay out the massive foundations of a pyramid or trace the route for transporting a monolith across the desert. Leveling these vast foundations required another stroke of genius. They dug a network of shallow trenches across the building site and filled them with water. The surface of water always finds a perfectly level plane. By measuring down from this waterline to the bedrock at regular points, they could meticulously chip away the high spots, creating a base that was flawlessly flat across acres of land. This ensured that the first course of stones was perfectly horizontal, a critical requirement for a stable, multi-story structure. But perhaps their most breathtaking precision was in celestial alignment. The Great Pyramid of Giza is oriented to true north with an error of just 1/15 of a degree. How could they achieve such accuracy without modern instruments? They used devices like the Egyptian merkit, a simple forked sight made from a palm rib, used in conjunction with a plumb bob. An astronomer priest would track the passage of a specific star, marking its arc across the night sky. By bisecting the angle between its rising and setting positions, they could find a precise north-south line. This was not just a technical exercise, it was a sacred act connecting the earthly realm with the eternal order of the cosmos. This deep connection is echoed in the alignments of Stonehenge, where the heel stone marks the spot where the sun rises on the summer solstice. How was this profound knowledge, accumulated over centuries, passed down through generations without detailed written manuals? It was likely an oral tradition, a sacred science taught from master to apprentice through years of hands-on practice and ritual. The intellectual mastery of surveying and astronomy provided the confident blueprint for the physical execution, turning a chaotic building site into a manifestation of cosmic order on Earth. A crack echoes through the quarry as a wooden lever snaps under the strain. The massive block settles back into the mud, unmoved. For the ancient foreman watching, this was not a catastrophe, but a lesson. His world was not one of fixed blueprints, but of constant, on-the-ground adaptation. Every failure taught him something new about the stone, the soil, and the limits of his tools, knowledge he would immediately apply to the next attempt. This dynamic process of trial and error was the true engine of innovation, a living science passed down through generations as practical know-how or savoir-faire. It was knowledge earned by doing, not just by thinking. Cognitive archaeologists suggest this deep, intuitive understanding was often embedded within ritual and oral tradition. The chants used to synchronize workers were not just for rhythm, they were memory palaces encoding generations of hard-won wisdom about which ropes hold best, how much water to mix with clay for a summer haul, and the subtle signs that a ramp was nearing collapse. We can see this adaptive spirit etched into the landscapes of abandoned projects. On Easter Island, the scattered Moai statues lying along ancient roads tell a silent story of experimentation. Some were clearly being dragged horizontally on sledges. Others show evidence of a different technique, the walking method, where teams rocked them from side to side. The islanders were not following a single manual. They were trying different solutions, learning from each partial success and each statue that fell and could not be raised again. This iterative process extended to the smallest details. A team might discover that a certain type of clay became too slick in the rainy season, forcing them to mix in gravel for better traction. After a ramp buckled under a particularly heavy load, the foreman would order a shallower angle for the next one, even if it meant a much longer construction time. This wisdom was transferred through a master-apprentice system, where a young worker learned not from a textbook, but by watching where his master placed the fulcrum for a tricky lift, or by feeling the exact tension a rope could take before fraying. How many of our own modern engineering marvels, from spacecraft to skyscrapers, rely on this same fundamental process of prototyping, testing, and refining based on failure? This relentless, adaptive spirit meant that solutions were never one size fits all. They were beautifully, uniquely tailored to the local environment and culture, leading to the incredible diversity of methods we see across the ancient world. A giant kite tugging at the sky could lift an obelisk that 1,000 men could not budge. This is the essence of the Kite Hypothesis, a bold and controversial idea that reimagines the ancient builder's toolkit. Proponents of this theory suggest that massive linen sails, harnessed to the reliable desert winds, provided an auxiliary lifting force for the heaviest stones. The concept was dramatically tested by software engineer Maureen Clemens, who, inspired by a hieroglyphic panel depicting a curved object, led a team that successfully raised a 3-ton obelisk using a large kite and a pulley system. The idea is captivating, a marriage of simple materials and natural power. Yet skeptics point to the immense difficulties of controlling such a massive kite with only ropes, the unpredictable nature of wind, and the complete absence of direct archaeological evidence for kites being used in this way. The materials were certainly available, strong linen cloth and sturdy ropes, but the knowledge required to engineer and pilot a kite large enough to provide meaningful lift for a several hundred-ton block would have been extraordinarily sophisticated. It forces us to ask, could the key to an ancient mystery be something as ephemeral and invisible as the wind? A different kind of revolution is proposed by the Geopolymer Theory, which challenges the very nature of the Great Pyramid stones. Materials scientist Joseph Davidovitz argues that many of the blocks are not natural limestone quarried and dragged, but a form of ancient concrete. He suggests workers mined a soft, clay-rich limestone, dissolved it in water, mixed it with a reactive binder like natron or ash, and then poured this geopolymer slurry into wooden molds right on the pyramid. The evidence cited includes the unusual texture of the stones, which sometimes contain air bubbles and organic fibers not found in natural limestone, and the precise, almost puzzle-like fit between blocks that would be easier to achieve with a cast material than with carved stone. Mainstream geology and archaeology largely reject this view, countering that the stones show clear signs of being quarried, with identifiable fossil shells and crystalline structures consistent with natural formation. They also question the logistical nightmare of producing such vast quantities of a consistent geopolymer mix on site. Yet the theory persists, a testament to the creative lengths we will go to explain the seemingly inexplicable. What other lost technologies, what other fundamental principles of chemistry or physics have we simply failed to recognize because they do not fit our modern framework? These fringe theories, whether ultimately proven right or wrong, serve a vital purpose. They shake the foundations of conventional wisdom and remind us that the full story of ancient engineering is still being written, one bold hypothesis at a time. The Great Pyramid of Giza stands as the ultimate synthesis of ancient engineering, a project where every technique was perfected and integrated into a single, breathtaking operation. It was built from 2.3 million blocks of limestone and granite, each one averaging 2.5 tons, assembled over just 20 years. That means workers had to quarry, shape, transport, and set into place one block every 2 to 3 minutes of every single working day for 2 decades. How could such a rhythm possibly be sustained? The answer lies in a perfectly orchestrated system that began deep underground. The finest white limestone came from quarries at Tura across the Nile, while the granite for the inner chambers was sourced from Aswan, 500 miles to the south. At each quarry, specialized crews used wooden wedges and dolerite pounders to free the stones, shaping them with astonishing precision before the journey even began. The stones from Tura were likely loaded onto wooden barges during the Nile's annual flood, floating effortlessly to a harbor at the base of the Giza plateau. From there, the real challenge started. They were transferred onto massive wooden sledges. Teams of laborers then pulled these sledges along paved causeways, with water bearers constantly dousing the path to create a slick film of mud that reduced friction. The sound must have been a constant, low roar of dragging wood, sloshing water, and rhythmic chanting. Recent archaeological work at the Hatnab Alabaster Quarry offers a direct clue to the next phase. There, researchers uncovered a remarkably preserved ramp system with staircases on either side and post holes. This suggests that teams pulling ropes could walk up the stairs while the sledges were dragged up the central ramp, a highly efficient use of human power. At Giza, a similar, massive ramp, perhaps a zigzag or spiral structure built against the growing pyramid, would have been the highway to the sky. As the pyramid rose, workers used levers to make fine adjustments, patiently walking each block into its final, perfect position. The internal chambers represent a puzzle within the puzzle. How did they lift the 50-ton granite beams for the king's chamber, over 150 feet in the air? The likely answer is an intricate system of internal ramps and counterweights, a labyrinth of temporary wooden structures that allowed them to hoist these monolithic slabs into place. But the stones and ramps were only part of the story. The true marvel was the human organization. Egyptologist Mark Lehner's excavations at Giza have revealed a sprawling workers' city, complete with barracks, bakeries capable of producing thousands of loaves and large vats for brewing beer. This was not a slave camp, but a highly organized community supporting a skilled workforce of 20 to 30,000 people. They were divided into crews with names like the Friends of Khufu or the Drunkards of Menkora, each with their own pride and identity. Can you comprehend the administrative genius required to manage the supply chains for food, water, tools, and materials for this multitude, year after year? The pyramid is more than a tomb. It is the physical proof of what humanity can achieve when we unite our minds and muscles toward a single, monumental goal. This same spirit of coordinated genius would find its echo thousands of miles away, in the cloud-shrouded mountains of South America. The silence of Rapa Nui is broken only by the wind and the gaze of nearly 1,000 stone giants. On this remote island, one of the most isolated places on Earth, the Rapa Nui people carved and transported the Moai, monolithic human figures that stand as a profound monument to human will. These statues were not shaped from ordinary rock, but from compressed volcanic ash, a surprisingly light but fragile material called tuff. Even so, the average Moai stands 13 feet tall and weighs 14 tons, with the largest Colossus, nicknamed El Gigante, left unfinished in the quarry at a staggering estimated weight of 70 to 80 tons. The challenge they faced was absolute. The island offered no large trees for making heavy rollers or sledges, and no draft animals like oxen existed to share the burden. Every ounce of force had to come from human ingenuity and muscle. For decades, the dominant theory was a horizontal drag. The leading idea was that the islanders laid the statues on a sledge or a wooden frame and pulled them over a path of lubricated sweet potato paste using a system of log rollers. This method seemed logical, a direct application of techniques used elsewhere. But then, a compelling new theory emerged, one that suggested the Moai did not lie down for their journey, they walked. Archaeologists Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo championed this idea, arguing that the statues were engineered to move upright. Their design, with a heavy, protruding belly that shifts the center of gravity forward and a narrow, D-shaped base that allows it to pivot, is perfectly suited for a rocking motion. In a dramatic 2012 experiment, they proved it was possible. With just 3 teams of people using ropes tied to the statue's head and base, they successfully walked a concrete replica Moai down a road. One team pulled forward to tilt the statue, while another team on the opposite side guided its landing, creating a slow, staggering, but effective gait. This method is not just theatrical, it is highly efficient. Comparative studies suggest the walking technique could have required as little as half the energy and far fewer people than dragging the statue horizontally on rollers. The evidence on the ground supports this. The ancient roads leading from the Rano Raraku quarry are not flat, smooth pathways ideal for sledges. They are often V-shaped or have a sunken central groove, a feature that would have been a hindrance for a horizontal pull, but would have helped stabilize a tall, walking statue, preventing it from tipping too far to either side. Furthermore, the roads are littered with Moai that were abandoned in an upright, standing position, not lying on their backs as you would expect from a failed dragging attempt. The ultimate destination for these walking giants was the Ahu, the ceremonial stone platforms that line the coast. Once a Moai arrived at its Ahu, the final, most delicate operation began, using levers and ramps to raise it onto the platform and top it with its distinctive red stone headdress or pukao. What spiritual conviction, what profound cultural drive could compel a society to dedicate generations to making stone giants walk across their island? The story of the Moai is a breathtaking lesson in adapting to extreme limitations, a quality that echoes in the misty highlands of the Andes, where another civilization moved mountains in a very different way. The great sarsen stones of Stonehenge stand as silent sentinels on the Salisbury Plain, but their smaller cousins, the Bluestones, hold a far more dramatic secret. Their geological fingerprint points unequivocally to the Preseli Hills in Wales, a grueling journey of over 140 miles. This raises one of archaeology's most enduring questions. Did Neolithic builders undertake this epic voyage, or did ancient Ice Age glaciers do the heavy lifting, depositing the stones nearby as the ice retreated? While the glacial theory offers a tempting shortcut, most evidence now points to a staggering feat of human determination. The journey of a single bluestone would have been a multi-stage odyssey. First, teams would have to extract the pillar and likely rough shape it in the Welsh quarries. Then, using wooden sledges and rollers, they would have dragged it across rugged terrain to a river leading to the sea. Here, the real ingenuity began. The stones could have been loaded onto large, sewn plank boats or rafts, navigating the treacherous currents of the Welsh coast and the Bristol Channel. This maritime leg was not a simple ferry crossing. It was a voyage of dozens of miles, a testament to their skill as sailors. Upon reaching a river like the Avon, the stones were transferred to smaller barges for the journey inland before the final, back-breaking overland haul to the sacred site. Why choose such an impossibly difficult stone? The answer may lie in its perceived power. The bluestones are spotted dolerite, a rock that rings with a metallic chime when struck. In a society deeply connected to the spiritual world, this sonic quality, this literal voice of the stone, may have been worth any distance. This theory of a sacred pilgrimage is bolstered by the discovery of a massive settlement at Durrington Walls, just 2 miles from Stonehenge. This so-called Superhenge, with its own massive timber circles and evidence of vast seasonal feasting, appears to have been the construction camp and ceremonial center for the builders. It was the bustling, temporary city that built the eternal stone circle. In the year 2000, a group of modern enthusiasts attempted to replicate the entire proposed Bluestone journey in the Millennium Stone project. They carved a 3-ton stone, built a replica Neolithic sled, and attempted to drag it across the Welsh countryside and float it on a giant wicker basket boat. The project was fraught with difficulties, from the sled disintegrating on rough ground to the boat nearly capsizing, starkly illustrating the immense challenges the original builders overcame. Their successful, if arduous, completion of the route proved that such a journey was physically possible with Neolithic technology, a powerful testament to the power of coordinated human will. The very act of moving the bluestones, this shared struggle across a generation, may have been as important as the final arrangement. Each stone was not just a building block, but a vessel of memory, its long journey imbuing it with a significance that transcended its physical form. The desert near ancient Thebes holds 2 silent giants, each a mountain turned into a king. The Colossi of Memnon, twin statues of Pharaoh Amenhotep III, tower over the plain, each carved from a single block of quartzite sandstone weighing 720 tons. Their sheer scale is staggering, but their journey is the true marvel. This stone was not local. It was quarried near modern-day Cairo, over 400 miles away. Moving these titans required a masterful collaboration with the landscape itself, transforming the Nile into a liquid highway. Engineers would have waited for the annual flood, when the river swelled and pushed its banks further inland. At that perfect moment, they maneuvered a barge of almost unimaginable size into position. This was not a simple boat. It was a colossal, reinforced vessel, a floating fortress of timber designed to bear a concentrated weight greater than a fully laden spaceship. Can you envision the tension as this precious, impossible cargo was slowly floated down the river, a journey of weeks where a single storm could spell disaster? Upon arrival at Thebes, the challenge shifted from floating to grounding. The river's floodwaters were harnessed once more, likely channeled through man-made canals to bring the barge as close as possible to the statue's final resting place. There, a permanent paved causeway awaited, a road built for gods. The empty barges were intentionally sunk, the water was pumped or drained out, and the colossal stones were carefully dragged onto their prepared foundations, a final, monumental effort on solid ground. Yet this was only the most visible engineering feat in a valley dedicated to the afterlife. Just across the river, in the Valley of the Kings, a different kind of mountain moving was underway. Here, work was vertical and hidden as crews cut deep tombs into the cliffs. The real puzzle was getting the materials down. How do you lower a 100-ton granite sarcophagus, like the magnificent one made for Pharaoh Seti I, into a deep, narrow tomb shaft without it shattering on impact? The answer was a system of controlled descent. Ramps of compacted earth and rubble were built at steep angles into the tomb entrances. Heavy stone blocks were then likely used as counterweights, or a primitive winch called a capstan was employed, where workers would walk in a circle, winding a rope around a central post to lower the sarcophagus with excruciating slowness and precision. Every scrape, every groan of the ropes was a potential catastrophe in the making. The human intelligence behind these operations was housed in a special village, Deir el-Medina. This was not a temporary camp but a planned community for the elite artisans and builders. The tools excavated from their homes speak of a sophisticated craft. We find wooden mallets, copper chisels, and polished stone hammer stones, each one worn smooth by skilled hands. Most telling are the ostrich feathers, used not for decoration but as dust brushes, allowing workers to see the precise lines they were carving in the dark, dusty tombs. This was a society built around a single, sacred purpose. What spiritual conviction, what absolute belief in the afterlife could compel such painstaking, dangerous labor in the heart of a mountain? In Thebes, engineering was not just about moving mass, it was about fulfilling a divine contract, proving that necessity, especially religious necessity, truly was the mother of invention. The stone of the pregnant woman lies dormant in its Lebanese quarry, a behemoth of limestone weighing 1,000 tons, the largest hewn stone in human history. It is a sight that defies belief, a block the size of a 4-story house, abandoned in the very spot where it was born. This colossus was meant for the foundation of the nearby Roman temple complex at Baalbek, a site already famed for its trilithon, 3 800-ton stones perfectly fitted into a wall. Yet the Romans, masters of engineering across their empire, never moved anything else on this scale. Why here? What possessed them to push their own capabilities to the absolute breaking point? The answer lies in a breathtaking fusion of ambition and sheer mechanical force. To even contemplate moving the stone of the pregnant woman, Roman engineers would have relied on their most powerful tools, machines scaled to a near mythical size. They possessed massive winches and capstans, drums around which heavy ropes were wound, but for a load of 1,000 tons, these would not be turned by hand. Primary power source would have been the treadwheel, a giant wooden wheel acting as a squirrel cage for teams of men or oxen to walk inside, their collective weight and motion generating immense rotational force. The Roman architect Vitruvius described such cranes for standard construction, but the version needed for Baalbek would have been a monster, a wooden titan built from entire tree trunks. Structural engineers analyzing such a device calculate that the wooden components would have been operating at the very limit of their strength. The ropes, likely thick cables woven from hemp, would have been under unimaginable tension, each one a potential point of catastrophic failure. The proposed journey from the quarry to the temple site, a distance of nearly 1 kilometer, would have been a slow-motion epic. The stone would have been painstakingly loaded onto a sledge of colossal timbers, which then would have slid along a specially prepared trackway. This was not a simple dirt path. It was almost certainly a lubricated roadway, perhaps lined with wooden rails and slicked with olive oil or animal fat to reduce the colossal friction. Pulling this immense weight would have required a team of hundreds of oxen, their drivers coordinating with signal flags or horns to ensure every ounce of force was applied in unison. Can you fathom the noise, the dust, the groaning of wood, and the sheer tension in the air as this mountain inched forward? So why was this titan ultimately left behind? Close inspection reveals a deep crack running through its length. This flaw may have been discovered only after the Herculean effort of quarrying was complete, rendering the stone useless for its sacred purpose. Or perhaps after attempting the initial stages of movement, the engineers realized the task was simply beyond them, that they had finally met a challenge that even Roman ingenuity could not conquer. The stone of the pregnant woman stands as a permanent monument to the outer edge of ancient capability, a testament to both breathtaking confidence and the humbling power of physical reality. Deep in the humid jungles of Mexico, the Olmec people confronted a monumental challenge with stone and will. They carved colossal heads from solid basalt, each one a towering portrait weighing up to 50 tons. The basalt itself came from the Tuxtla Mountains, quarried using even harder stones like jadate and serpentine to pound and grind the volcanic rock into a rough shape. This initial roughing out at the quarry was a critical strategy. By removing excess stone before the journey began, they significantly lightened the load for the arduous trip ahead. How do you move a 50-ton block of stone through swampy, lowland terrain without draft animals or the wheel? The Olmec answer was to turn the rivers into their highways. The prevailing theory suggests they maneuvered these partially carved giants onto massive rafts, floating them downstream whenever possible. For the overland segments, they likely employed an army of workers with ropes and log rollers, inching the stones across the soggy earth. Archaeologists have found evidence of raised ceremonial pathways, known as sakbiob, which may have served as stable causeways for this final haul to the ritual sites. Once a head reached its sacred destination, the true artistry began. Using simple tools of stone, wood, and water, master craftsmen would spend months, perhaps years, refining the features. They gave the stone a soul, carving the distinctive helmet, the broad nose, and the enigmatic expression that has captivated the world for millennia. These were not anonymous idols, but likely portraits of powerful rulers. The San Lorenzo head, for instance, was not simply abandoned. It was carefully and ritually buried by the Olmec themselves, then later moved and reburied, a testament to its enduring significance long after the ruler it honored had passed. This act of repeated veneration and relocation hints at a complex cultural narrative woven around these stone giants. What kind of social power must an Olmec chieftain have wielded to command the labor of an entire community for such a project? In a society without a vast imperial bureaucracy, the ability to organize hundreds of people to drag a 50-ton stone through the jungle speaks to a profound and compelling authority. The colossal heads stand as silent, powerful proof that the drive to move mountains emerged independently across the globe, a universal testament to human ambition. A single stone cannot build a pyramid, nor can a lone worker move a mountain. The true foundation of every ancient wonder was the society that dreamed it into being. Step back from the levers and ramps for a moment and consider the human engine, the vast and complex social structures that transformed seasonal farmers into a year-round construction army. This was not merely a matter of logistics, but a profound social act, a deliberate weaving of political power, religious belief, and community identity into something permanent and stone. Across the globe, civilizations developed distinct models to mobilize their people. In Old Kingdom Egypt, a centralized command economy used the corvée labor system, a form of national service that drafted farmers to work on state projects when the Nile's floodwaters covered their fields. Far away in the Andes, the Inca Empire perfected the mita, a rotational labor tax that drew workers from across its vast territory to build roads, terraces, and citadels like Machu Picchu. The Roman Empire, in contrast, frequently relied on the brutal efficiency of slave labor for its most grueling public works, while in chiefdoms like that of the Olmecs, the labor was likely kin-based, organized around family and clan lineages to raise the colossal heads that honored their rulers. Anthropologists like Timothy Earle have shown that these monumental projects were a powerful strategy for elite aggrandizement, a way for emerging rulers to cement their authority, but they were also a tool for social cohesion. The shared, backbreaking work of building something for the gods or the community forged a powerful collective identity, turning a scattered population into a unified people. The logistics of sustaining this human machine were as impressive as the engineering. How do you feed 30,000 people for 20 years in a desert? The answer lies in a state-level economy operating with breathtaking precision. The recently discovered Wadi al-Jarf papyri, logbooks from the reign of Khufu, detail the intricate supply chains that brought boatloads of food to the Giza plateau from estates across Egypt. Bread and beer, the staples of the Egyptian diet, were produced on an industrial scale. Excavations at the workers' settlement at Giza have uncovered massive bakeries capable of producing thousands of loaves daily and large vats for brewing thousands of liters of beer. This was not a starving, desperate workforce. Evidence from worker cemeteries reveals a surprising reality. Skeletons show signs of healed fractures, indicating that these laborers received medical care. The bones also tell a story of a protein-rich diet, with cuts of beef, sheep, and goat being a regular part of their rations. This contradicts the old Hollywood narrative of whips and slaves, pointing instead to a valued, skilled workforce that was cared for because its continued health was essential to the state's greatest project. Can you picture the sprawling settlement, not a prison camp but a bustling, organized city, with its administrators, cooks, and priests, all dedicated to the singular goal of sustaining the builders? The ability to organize people on this scale, to house them, feed them, and motivate them for generations, was as crucial an innovation as the invention of the ramp or the sledge. When we look at our own modern mega projects, the International Space Station or vast dam complexes, what do they reveal about our society's values and its own forms of organization? These ancient stones ask us to consider not just how they were moved, but why so many people agreed to move them. The sweat and strain of moving mountains was not merely a physical task, but a profound spiritual dialogue. For the ancient builders, every block they quarried, every inch they dragged, was an act charged with meaning, a direct conversation with the gods. The very mountains they carved from were often seen as the sacred dwellings of deities, the axis where heaven and earth met. To shape this stone was to participate in the creation of the cosmos itself, transforming a chaotic, natural landscape into an ordered, divine one. In Egypt, this concept was known as Ma'at, the fundamental principle of truth, balance, and cosmic order. Building a pyramid was not just constructing a tomb, it was a ritual to maintain Ma'at, ensuring the sun would rise, the Nile would flood, and the world would not slip back into chaos. The laborer heaving on a rope was not just a worker, he was a priest helping to sustain the universe. This spiritual dimension provided the unwavering, multi-generational purpose that raw political power alone could never achieve. The evidence for this sacred worldview is etched into the sites themselves. Foundation deposits buried beneath temple corners contained ceremonial objects, amulets, and offerings to bless and protect the construction. At Stonehenge, the careful alignment of the stones with the solstice sun transformed the circle from a mere monument into a celestial calendar and a gateway to the other world, a place where the living could commune with the ancestors. On Easter Island, the Moai were far more than statues. They were vessels for Mana, the spiritual power of the ancestral chiefs they depicted. The act of carving and walking these giants across the island was a way of transferring this potent life force to protect the community. Even the names given to these stones reveal their sacred nature. The 1,000-ton behemoth in the Baalbek quarry is called the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, a name that strongly suggests an association with a local fertility cult, imbuing the raw material with the power of creation and life. Can you feel the difference this perspective creates? The endless, back-breaking labor is no longer a burden but a privilege. The dust in your throat, the ache in your muscles, becomes a form of worship, a prayer made physical. This fusion of labor, art, and faith raises a haunting question for our own time. Do we have any modern projects that command such universal devotion, that fuse the practical with the spiritual in a way that can inspire thousands to work for a goal they may never see completed? The ancient wonders stand not just as feats of engineering, but as monuments to the human spirit's capacity for transcendent belief. The ancient builder's greatest teacher was the land itself. Every forest, every riverbed, every stone outcrop presented both a puzzle and a potential solution. Their methods were not born in a vacuum, but were a direct, ingenious response to the materials nature provided. They practiced a form of adaptive resource management that would be the envy of any modern engineer, turning local limitations into unique strengths. On Easter Island, the absence of large trees meant there was no timber for massive sledges or sturdy rollers. This environmental constraint forced the Rapa Nui people to innovate with what they did have: human ingenuity and the statue's own clever design, leading to the remarkable walking technique. Conversely, in the cedar-rich forests of Lebanon, Roman engineers had the perfect resource for their most ambitious project. The giant cedars provided the immense, sturdy timbers needed to construct the colossal barges that floated the 800-ton Baalbek stones down the coast, a solution that would have been impossible on a treeless island. Environmental archaeologists work like detectives, piecing together these long-vanished landscapes. By analyzing pollen samples and studying soil layers, they can reconstruct ancient forests that were stripped for construction, revealing the true cradle of these engineering marvels. The builders possessed a deep, intuitive knowledge of material properties. They knew that dolerite, a volcanic rock harder than granite, was the perfect tool for pounding and shaping obelisks in Aswan. They understood that a flexible wood like ash could make a lever that bent without breaking under strain, while a rigid oak was better for a sledge's runner. The very fibers used for ropes were chosen with care: papyrus in Egypt for its length and strength, hemp in other regions for its durability. This intimate relationship with local geology directly shaped architectural styles. In Mesopotamia, where stone was scarce, builders turned to the endless plains of mud, creating durable sun-dried bricks that built ziggurats reaching for the heavens. In Greece, where marble quarries dotted the landscape, they developed techniques for extracting and refining magnificent columns. Perhaps one of the most revolutionary examples of material mastery was Roman concrete. By mixing lime with pozzolana, a volcanic ash found near Rome, they created a hydraulic concrete that could set and harden even underwater. This single material innovation allowed them to build massive, durable harbors that withstood the pounding waves, forever changing maritime construction. It makes you wonder, in our modern world of global supply chains that ship resources across the planet, have we lost that deep, sustainable connection to our immediate environment? For the ancient builder, working within environmental limits was not a restriction. It was the very spark that ignited their most brilliant and enduring creations. A master builder's most valuable tool was not his mallet, but his memory. In a world without engineering textbooks or digital archives, the vast and complex knowledge of moving mountains lived and died with the skilled artisans themselves. This intellectual legacy was preserved through a sacred chain of apprenticeship, a system where a father would teach his son, or a master would mentor a promising youth, passing down generations of hard-won wisdom through spoken word and direct, hands-on demonstration. The survival of entire architectural traditions depended on this fragile, human connection. The process was one of total immersion. A young apprentice would begin with the simplest tasks, perhaps mixing the correct slurry of clay and water for a slippery path, or learning to tie the specific knots that held under immense strain. For years he would watch, listen, and practice, absorbing the rhythms and rituals of the craft. The knowledge was not just technical, it was often encoded within stories, songs, and chants. Rhythmic work songs used during a haul did more than synchronize pulling. They served as living manuals, their verses embedding critical details about lever placement, rope tension, and the subtle signs of a failing ramp. This oral tradition was remarkably robust. Studies of other cultures with strong oral histories, like the griots of West Africa, show that vital information can be preserved with astonishing accuracy across centuries when embedded in poetic or musical structures. The rules of thumb for creating a stable foundation or calculating a ramp's gradient became proverbs, repeated until they were as instinctive as breathing. Yet this system also fostered a culture of deliberate secrecy. Guild-like structures, similar to the medieval stonemasons, likely existed to protect the status of skilled artisans. Their knowledge was their power, a commodity that made them indispensable to pharaohs and kings. They might use secret hand signs, coded language, or guarded rituals to ensure that only the fully initiated could access the inner mysteries of their craft. This secrecy was a practical form of job security. In a world where your value was measured by what you alone knew, we have glimpses of their technical knowledge in the rare artifacts that survived. In Egypt, artisans practiced designs and solved geometric problems on ostraca, broken pieces of pottery that served as their scratch paper. The Rhind mathematical papyrus is a more formalized example, a collection of mathematical problems and solutions that demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of the geometry needed for architecture, from calculating volumes of stone to determining slopes. Scale models made from wood or clay were another vital teaching tool, allowing a master to demonstrate the complex process of raising a column or balancing a lintel without risking a single precious stone. This delicate chain of knowledge passed from one hand to the next was the true lifeline of ancient engineering. It makes you wonder, in our own digital age where every fact is a click away, what profound practical wisdom would we lose if our servers went dark forever? The ancient builders understood that the most enduring storage device was not clay or papyrus, but the disciplined human mind. A giant stone block fitted so perfectly you cannot slip a credit card between the joints. This iconic image of the Great Pyramid is often held up as proof that ancient builders must have had help from advanced lasers or otherworldly beings. The truth, however, is a far more human story of meticulous craftsmanship and simple, brilliant physics. The appeal of alien theories is understandable. They offer a clean, simple answer to a profoundly complex achievement, a shortcut that bypasses the messy reality of decades of human toil. Yet this narrative does a great disservice to our ancestors, robbing them of the credit for their own ingenuity. The real story, grounded in archaeological evidence, is not less amazing but more so. Take the myth of the perfectly fitted stones. The reality is that the visible, outer casing stones of the pyramids were indeed cut with astonishing precision, but this was a surface treatment. The millions of core blocks inside the structure are often rough and irregular, fitted with rubble and gypsum mortar. This mortar was not just glue, it was a clever leveling agent. Workers would set a block in place, and while the gypsum plaster was still wet, they could tap the stone slightly, using the liquid mortar as a lubricant to slide it into its final, snug position. Once the plaster set, the block was locked in. The final, razor-thin joints we marvel at today were then achieved by a process called dressing. After a course of stones was laid, masons would go back and painstakingly grind the surfaces perfectly flat using a simple but effective abrasive. They used sand, a material harder than limestone, sprinkled on the stone. Then, with a flat granite or dolerite rub stone, they would grind the surfaces back and forth, the sand particles acting as countless microscopic cutting tools. This patient abrasion, a technique you can try with 2 pieces of sandpaper, is what created those legendary seamless joins. No lasers required, just relentless patience and a deep understanding of materials. Another persistent claim is that the ancient Egyptians needed tools harder than copper to work granite. How could a soft metal carve such hard stone? The answer is they rarely used copper chisels on granite. For quarrying and shaping granite, their primary tools were even harder stones. They used dolerite pounders, balls of volcanic rock, to literally pulverize the granite surface through relentless, patient pounding. For cutting precise slots or drilling holes, they used a sand abrasive again. A copper tube, even a soft one, can drill into granite if you feed it with wet sand and turn it under pressure. The quartz in the sand, harder than the granite, does all the actual cutting. Experimental archaeologist denies stocks successfully replicated this process, demonstrating how a copper saw, with the addition of sand and water, could slice through a block of granite in a matter of hours. The evidence is right there on the unfinished artifacts. The unfinished obelisk in Aswan is covered in channels and holes made by these very methods, a permanent workshop manual carved in stone. Archaeologists like Flint Dibble point out that these alternative theories are often built on a foundation of anachronisms and factual errors. They impose a modern, technological mindset onto the past, assuming that if we would use a machine, they must have as well. They also frequently underestimate the sheer power of large, coordinated human labor over long periods of time. A theory like Erich von Däniken's Chariots of the Gods, which swept the world decades ago, presented a seductive fantasy. It suggested that our history was far more exciting, that gods from the stars walked among us. But this fantasy came at a cost. It implied that indigenous cultures across the globe were incapable of creating the magnificent structures that surrounded them, a perspective that subtly reinforces colonialist ideas of technological superiority. Why is it so difficult for us to accept that ancient people, with keen observation, generations of trial and error, and a powerful shared purpose, could achieve these wonders? Perhaps it forces us to confront the limits of our own modern capabilities, or maybe it reveals our own impatience with the slow, grand scale of deep time. When we reclaim these achievements for humanity, we are not demystifying them. We are honoring the countless forgotten hands and minds who, with nothing but simple tools and colossal determination, truly did move mountains. A 1,000-ton stone moved without a single fossil fuel emission stands as a timeless lesson in efficiency. Our modern world, for all its power, often relies on brute force and global supply chains that come with a heavy environmental cost. The ancient builders offer us a different blueprint, one grounded in the principles of appropriate technology. They consistently chose the simplest, most elegant tool for the job, whether it was a lever, a water-slicked path, or a team of oxen. This was not a sign of primitive thinking, but of profound intelligence. They worked with natural forces like gravity, friction, and buoyancy, harnessing them instead of fighting them with immense energy inputs. This human-centric design prioritized solutions that amplified the power of the people and the materials immediately available to them. The result was a form of sustainability we are only now relearning. Their projects were built with locally sourced stone, wood, and earth. The ropes were biodegradable, the sledges could be repurposed, and the ramps were dismantled, their earth returned to the landscape. The entire operation was powered by renewable energy, from human muscle fueled by local grain to the wind that filled the sails of their barges. Compare this to the carbon footprint of a modern skyscraper, with its steel smelted using coal and its components shipped across oceans. Green architects and engineers are now looking back to these methods with renewed respect. They see immense value in this localized, low-energy approach, especially in an era of climate crisis and resource scarcity. The parallels are striking. Modern urban search and rescue teams use levers and inflatable airbags, direct descendants of ancient tools, to lift collapsed concrete and save lives. When moving massive historical buildings or heavy machinery, engineers still employ low-friction techniques, using Teflon pads that function like the slick clay paths of antiquity. Even the organizational models have modern applications. The management of thousands of volunteers after a natural disaster, or the coordination of a community-built playground, echoes the social structures that built the pyramids, proving that human coordination remains a powerful, renewable resource. Perhaps the most direct lesson comes from material science. For decades, we could not understand why Roman seawalls, submerged for 2,000 years, remained stronger than their modern concrete counterparts. The secret, rediscovered only recently, was the Roman use of volcanic ash. This ingredient creates a chemical reaction that actually strengthens the concrete over time, especially in seawater, a recipe we had forgotten. This is not about abandoning our technology, but about integrating ancient wisdom. What if we applied this mindset to our own consumption and waste? Could we design buildings that cool themselves through passive ventilation, as the ancients did, instead of relying solely on energy-hungry air conditioning? Can we rethink our supply chains to favor local materials, reducing transportation emissions and supporting regional economies? The past does not give us a rigid manual to follow, but it offers a powerful set of principles for a more resilient and harmonious future. A towering pyramid does more than block the sun, it reshapes the human mind. This profound psychological effect, the feeling of awe, is the silent partner in every ancient wonder. When you stand before a structure so vast it defies your sense of scale, something fundamental shifts within you. Psychologists describe awe as the emotion we feel in the presence of something vast that transcends our current understanding of the world. It is a mixture of wonder, humility, and a slight fear of the sublime. For the ancient citizen seeing their temple rise for the first time, or for the modern tourist gazing up at the Great Wall, the experience is the same, a momentary shattering of the self, a feeling of being part of something immeasurably grand. This feeling is not passive, it is transformative. It can make people more generous, more connected to their community, and more open to new ideas. The drive to create these awe-inspiring monuments is at its heart a drive for transcendence. It is the human spirit screaming into the void, demanding to be remembered. We are mortal, our lives are fleeting, but a mountain of stone can speak our name for thousands of years. This is the quest for legacy, the desire to etch our existence onto the face of the planet itself. Philosophers have long noted that engaging in a vast, multi-generational project can provide a profound sense of purpose. The individual laborer might never see the finished pyramid, but he knew he was contributing to a creation that would outlive his children's children, connecting his brief life to an eternal story. This same impulse fuels our greatest cultural endeavors today. A symphony, a novel, a painting, all our attempts to create something that outlasts the body. It is the very engine of our civilization, pushing us to compose music, to write laws, and to launch rockets toward other worlds. Yet this powerful drive has a dark shadow. The same ambition that built cathedrals also built them on the backs of exploited labor. The same desire for eternal glory could drain a kingdom's resources, leaving its people impoverished for a vanity project. The stones of Baalbek are awe-inspiring, but they also whisper of the immense human cost required to satisfy one emperor's vision. History warns us that the pursuit of legacy, when untempered by empathy, can become a form of tyranny. This duality is written into our modern world. The pyramids are not just tourist attractions, they are the bedrock of Egyptian national identity. The Great Wall is more than a fortification. It is a symbol of Chinese cultural perseverance across millennia. These structures provide a continuous thread, a tangible link to a deep past that tells a people who they are. So we must ask ourselves, with all our modern technology and global resources, what are we building that will inspire that same shudder of awe 4,000 years from now? Are we creating anything that speaks to the human spirit with such power and permanence? Our skyscrapers are impressive, but will their ruins tell a story of community and cosmic belief, or of commerce? The thread that connects us to the ancient world is not just the methods they used, but the shared, burning need to reach beyond our grasp and build the impossible. Our journey ends where it began, not with a single secret, but with a profound realization. From the levers that conquered gravity to the water-slicked paths that defeated friction, from the ramps that became highways to the sky to the coordinated rhythm of thousands of hands, the answer was never one tool. It was a brilliant tapestry woven from many threads of ingenuity. These builders possessed a deep, intuitive mastery of the world around them. They understood physics without equations, material science without laboratories, and logistics without computers. They saw in a muddy puddle a solution for moving a mountain, and in a simple log the power to roll a giant. Their true machinery was the human spirit, driven by an unshakable belief in something greater than themselves. So the next time you feel daunted by a modern challenge, remember the image of a team moving a 70-ton stone with nothing but ropes, logs, and unwavering determination. These ancient wonders are not relics of a lost, superior age. They are monuments to our own enduring potential, a permanent challenge etched in stone, urging us to look at our own limitations and see only possibilities. We would love to hear which ancient technique you find most inspiring. Was it the elegant lever, the slippery sledge, or the walking statues of Easter Island? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this journey into our shared past has sparked your curiosity, please subscribe for more explorations into the great mysteries of history.